Welcome to another talk at WholeRen. It's so exciting to be in Pittsburgh, but most important, having a really interesting global traveler, Monty Simus. Monty came here from the West Coast, and he's departing here to go to Turkey, if I'm not mistaken. But we're really thrilled to have Monty here. And he's going to be sharing with us his experience, but most important, his passion. So without further ado, I'm going to go pass it on to my colleague Jason, and Jason is going to introduce our today's speaker, Monty Simus.
Mr. Montgomery Simus obtained his undergraduate degree at Yale and went on to get his graduate degree at Harvard. He is currently a senior fellow at Harvard's Advanced Leadership Initiative. Mr. Simus is really a creative global executive with more than 25 years of experience structuring, growing, and optimizing highly profitable enterprises in international business. With on-the-ground experience in more than 80 countries in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and South America, Mr. Simus has most recently focused on the design and management of complex international investments to address global challenges in public and private sectors such as energy infrastructure, renewables, off-grid solar, water, digital media, and financial services. Mr. Simus leads the private equity and impact investments of a $250 million annual revenue, a frontier market-focused business and philanthropic organization with offices in Afghanistan, India, the UAE, and the USA. In addition, Mr. Simus is a frequent writer and speaker on issues of freshwater scarcity, the linkages between water and energy, and emerging markets as well. When he's not working to restore Afghanistan's troubled Kabul River or optimizing business in some of the world's most challenging frontier markets, he is pursuing a PhD in water security at Imperial College London, and also serves as an associate in environmental science and engineering with Harvard University's John A. Paulson School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, while he works from a water-scarce base in Las Vegas with his wife and his son. So without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Montgomery Simus.
Ruse and Jason, thank you very much for your kind words, and Andrew, the entire WholeRen team, thank you for making my visit today as engaging and productive as possible. And I think it's befitting the subject that I'm going to share with you today. It's a little reflects some of my personal passion that I've held for a long time. But given Pittsburgh's sort of interesting history, generations ago, Pittsburgh was known, I think, as the Smoky City, is what I've read, primarily due to its reliance on the coal industry and then the steelmaking industry. And probably not too long back, you could think of a time when Pittsburgh was troubled by a lot of environmental issues and pollution. Now, of course, we sit in a fantastic world-class city now, which has sort of reinvented itself as a technology hub. And today I've chosen to talk to you a little bit about the convergence of technology and nature, technology and the environment. And I call it network nature. Looking a little bit about how wiring the wild, as I call it, is transforming the natural world around us. So in a world where you're reading about the Internet of Things, today we'll be talking about the Internet of Lakes. We might be talking about smart forests instead of smart grids, but it's sort of interesting to see how technology is now converging to our natural world. So it'll probably be 10 or 15 minutes of sharing some thoughts. Hopefully it's a very interactive session. Welcome a lot of comments, and I've basically just tried to give you a small glimpse of what I think is a really interesting sector going forward for us. So here's a quick agenda. I'll introduce what I call network nature, this interesting concept. I'll explain a little bit about my personal interest in this space, how I've come to arrive at thinking hard about this. We'll talk a little bit about the problems that this convergence of technology and the natural world around us can solve. and also some of the problems that this convergence might create for us. And then I'll quickly cover 3 case studies. These are but 3 amongst a myriad of things we could be chatting about today, where technology is sort of intervening in the natural lives around us, how it can make it better, more efficient, more productive, and maybe more environmentally sound. They include indoor farming, so disruptive agriculture. We're going to talk a little bit about crowdsourcing in the world of water conservation. And then we'll talk about something which I call the Earth Network, which is sort of wiring the world with some inexpensive sensor technology and then using the data from that. And then after we cover all that, I'll posit a few thoughts about what the future might look like. And again, that's where I welcome all your input, because in true sort of crowdsourcing fashion, collective conversation, collective thinking is far better than one individual. So, okay, so network to nature. Yeah, so basically it is as it sounds, where sort of new technical innovations are revolutionizing our relationship with the world around us. And how does this really occur? There's, again, a myriad of sort of examples, but really what's happening is we can see the world in a much greater level of granularity or detail. So we are able to see things which up until now were either too expensive, too difficult, or too discrete for us to see or hear. And then we can take advantage of all this incredible data which is being collected. And we can make that available to researchers, to policymakers, to entrepreneurs worldwide. They can exploit it or take advantage of it however they see fit, whether that's to sort of do incredibly detailed and important research about how we can better interact with the world around us, or perhaps there's just interesting data that changes our day-to-day behavior. So the idea is that with this distributed and decentralized data, we're going to change the way we can enjoy, we can exploit, we can utilize, and ultimately conserve the world around us. Okay, so that's a little bit about network nature. So there's, again, a myriad of different technologies that we can be talking about. I mean, everything from location tracking devices and GPS, I mean, whether they're appended to different species, to different plant locations, lasers, remote sensors, satellite technology, again, taking advantage of the convergence and some of the incredible sort of cost advantages and cost reductions that historically have been prohibitive in terms of mass deployment. Talk a little bit about digital mapping, which of course we all live, and again, being here in Pittsburgh, it's a pleasure. I mean, you have these autonomous cars that are on the road already, so this is very familiar to you folks. And then something which I think is sort of the next frontier, the next horizon in terms of network to nature, which is the application of artificial intelligence, or AI, using some of these large data sets to really think through and project what may be happening or what could happen. And I've converted that over the years into sort of a more structured interaction. I do some writing on the subject of water scarcity at a blog called Water Politics. I do some writing and thinking about the convergence of water and energy at a site called WaterG Nexus. And I also have a site with the same name, Network to Nature, which is primarily just a compendium of all that I see and happening in this space. And I've also had the professional opportunity to sort of see what happens when you apply innovative and new technologies to what are traditional markets or traditional sort of market scenarios or challenges in the world around us. Okay, so what problems can we solve? So you have the ability, all of a sudden, this new technology gives you the ability to create these enormous data sets, which historically, up until now, have been sort of unable to be, very difficult to be dynamically updated. So there's no dynamic update opportunity. These data sets have tended to be discrete. They've been sort of held in one researcher's or one research group's sort of repository, and it's been very difficult to have that updated and made consistent over temporal or geography. So what Network Nature can do is not only create these enormous databases, which can be dynamically updated and shared easily, but it can help normalize this data over, again, sort of geography, time, even species, right? So you can start looking at sort of behaviors amongst plants, forests, tree life, animal life, marine life in one particular part of the world, And because you have the rigor of a data set around it, you can extrapolate, you can make comparative analyses. And then finally, as I said earlier, I believe that this will form what I call the front line of natural intelligence, which is the application of using sophisticated and analytical power and rigor to work on these large data sets to sort of project forward about what's actually happening in the environment around us. Okay, but as always, with everything good, there's usually something that is not so good that might come along with it. So there's a few problems that all this accumulation and all this deployment of tracking and sensor technology might occur. So the same people that want to collect data for research purposes tend to be, or the same motivation is shared by poachers, right? So the same people that are tracking elephants using GPS technology for research purposes, they can be used for poaching purposes. So data security is as important in the natural world as it is in our world. And so now when you amass all this data, right, we have to be careful about how we use it and who has access to it. There is a great history, right, and a lot of concern, widely shared and understood concern about sort of biotechnology, right? So sometimes human intervention in the world around us, in our natural world around us, doesn't go as planned, or people have made errors. And you've seen this, you've seen this in the theater, right? The Jurassic Park scenario. You've seen it in a more realistic setting with zebra mussels and some of these other behaviors about particularly lake ecosystems or sort of constrained natural environments, forests, where we're trying to intervene to solve one deviation in the natural order of things, and things spun out of control and got out of hand. So with everything, network nature and the application of technology is not foolproof. You try to create scenarios and create instances where it's manageable and the downside risk is limited, but they're there. And finally, as I note here, there is some worry about synthetically engineered genes in particular. So when you talk about sort of genetic work, this is a pretty new area, right? And it's, again, an area that people have to think really hard about in terms of how they're creating new species or trying to improve or amend species. Thank you. Okay, so the first case, again, my objective here is to give you a really quick sort of introduction. So the first case, this is an area that I've spent a lot of time thinking about over the last few years. I call it ag resilience, so agricultural resilience. Basically the idea of how the world in which we find ourselves, population growing day by day, is going to feed itself, and how to feed itself sort of in an environmentally sustainable and productive fashion. So today, the top slide has a look for you at Spain. These are greenhouses in Spain growing fruits and vegetables. The bottom slide on that picture is a picture from China. So you can see that the traditional way of growing food is rapidly going to be outscaled. As population increases, we simply can't increase the number of greenhouses, the number of fields. We can't continue to apply more and more fertilizer on the same. It's like doing, we're basically producing food the same way that we've produced food for thousands of years. The good news is that with technology, in specific in the upper right-hand corner, advanced LED lighting technology, you can grow food in a very different fashion. You can also grow food in a very different fashion using floating farms. So this is a really interesting area, I think, is going to redefine sort of how we think about our connection with food. Okay, so why is disruptive agriculture better? This is a little bit of a heavy slide, but in short, I'll sort of summarize, right? So it's better in the sense that it's much less resource, less intensive, right? So you can grow food more productively and more efficiently. You actually don't even need soil. You can grow food using water. You can use it growing mists, aerosol mists. Your shelf life tends to be greater because you're not having to transport the food from the traditional growing areas to where it's consumed. So it's less energy intensive, so you're reducing the carbon footprint of driving the trucks back and forth. And more importantly for the consumer, the food tends to be much fresher, so it's much healthier. So there's a number of sort of attributes. Seasonality goes away, transportation costs, food miles, location. Water usage is way down. So there's a lot of sort of positive attributes about the move towards indoor agriculture. And historically, if you like, the negative aspect of indoor agriculture that was often sort of raised was the energy intensity, right? Lighting is the single most important aspect for any growth cycle. And it used to cost a lot of power in terms of electricity and in actual financial cost to have the lights to actually grow these plants indoor, which is why the advances in LED technology have been super important and really beneficial to actually kickstarting this industry, which I think you're going to see this industry really take off in the years ahead. Okay, so can it work? These are but 3 examples. Actually, the good news is I could have a slide, or I could have 10 slides now of real indoor farm companies. A lot of them are here in the United States, but there's some really interesting ones coming out of Asia as well. So you see companies like not only Sky Greens, Gotham Greens, you have Aero Farms, which has taken an old steel mill in Newark, New Jersey, and totally renovated it and rehabilitated it into a giant indoor farm. Company called Plenty, which just received over $200 million of investment from SoftBank to take their indoor farming technology and model overseas. So there's a lot happening in the space. This is not sort of this is not pie in the sky. This is not mom and pop. This is massive scale now starting to roll out. Okay. Why is it needed? Well, this sort of covers a little bit about some of the benefits, right? So we've got lots of people coming. We've got diminished water resources or water availability around the world. We have impaired our traditional agriculture areas now in many parts of the world impaired, either due to overuse or salinity or to excessive fertilizer use. You have sort of farming happens to be one of the most largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. And you have sort of increased food demand, and people are going to want to eat different foods. So as the rest of the world sort of accumulates wealth and becomes more and more prosperous, as in all our lives, right, their diets will change. And so they will demand different foods, some of which are even more intensive in the world around us. Okay, so that's one case study, one quick look at how technology is reinventing our relationship to how we use the earth to grow food. So I'm going to talk next about a subject of personal interest, which is water and water scarcity. So water is a really interesting resource, right? We can't live without it, yet we value it in a very unusual fashion. It's valued at almost zero, in fact. And this is a theory, this is an observation that even Aristotle made, where he talked about sort of the unusual differentiation where we value things such as diamonds at such a high rate, but and we absolutely have no need for diamonds for our sustenance, versus water, which is critical to our being, and we value it with, we really don't value it at all. So because of this valuation problem, which is worldwide and historic, we use water in usually a dramatically inefficient fashion. Whether we're lifting it out of the ground by pumping it and using it to irrigate, or whether we are just using it to drink, bathe, clean our surroundings, we tend to be a little bit irresponsible, a little bit inefficient about how we think about water. Okay, so traditionally, this is a recognized problem, and a utility manager sort of really understands this. So traditionally, what do? Well, the traditional solution to our water scarcity issue is what we call supply augmentation, which is let's build more dams, let's build sort of bigger reservoirs, let's build pipelines or water canals that will move water from one part of the country to the other part. And these are all sort of engineering intensive, major, long time lead projects. And they're very energy intensive. I mean, to lift water out of the ground or convey it, whether you're talking about moving water from Northern California to Southern California, which happens every day, or moving water across the desert in the Middle East, this is incredibly energy intensive. So over the years, utility managers, who tend to be our sort of interactive point or our go-between for water, have tried to work on the demand management side. So historically, utilities, at least here in the North American context, have chosen to be a little bit aggressive about it. They tend to sort of solve their water scarcity problem by rationing, or by raising prices, or making it very difficult. If you want more water, you have to pay for it. Now in San Francisco, so as I mentioned, California is always sort of an interesting example of forward thinking in regards to in the environment. Like at one point, the manager of the San Francisco water utility there thought that she had these really innovative sort of messaging ideas. So these have sort of subliminal theories about or messages behind them. You know, one's encouraging you to take quick showers. The other one is sort of encouraging you to change your toilet facilities or your toilet infrastructure. So, but lo and behold, the answer is that demand management in the water space, while having some short-term benefit and some limited success, we can't sort of engineer our way out of the problem by rationing and putting up posters. We have to come up with a different fashion, which is why, and next slide please, so is why there's a really interesting sort of innovation which is being tested. It's currently being tested in 2 locations. It's being tested in Valley of the Moon, so Northern California with a small utility there. It's being tested in the Moroccan city of Marrakesh with Redima, which is the utility serving that country. And the theory is this. The theory is that today almost every one of us carries a mobile phone in our pocket. We're very adept at sort of tracking things on our phone, whether it is emails, whether it is stock prices. So we're very accustomed sort of looking at data that's available on our phone and acting on it. So we thought, in this instance, is there a way to sort of motivate people to change their behavior with water by doing 2 things. One is giving them regular dynamic updates and showing them what's happening with their water use, and then also giving them a financial incentive to save water. And how would you do that? Because today, if I run one less bath during the week, I don't really see a big value to that. My water bill in Las Vegas goes down a small bit, but it's not sort of something that will motivate me to change my behavior. But if I felt more like I had ownership over that water rather than just renting it, my behavior would change a lot different, or much differently. I often tell people it's very similar to how you treat a rental car versus your own car. Typically, with your own car, you're extraordinarily careful about maintenance, keeping it clean, watching how you park. And in a rental car, it's sort of a free-for-all, at least in our household. So how would you convey a sense of ownership over water savings? That's our challenge. So in this instance, what these pilots are trying is we basically set a median. We say, okay, on average for the past 3 years, Monty has used, to make our numbers easy today, 100 gallons a day. That's my number. That's my median. That's what we call sort of our threshold of use. And then every gallon below that median that I use in a given time period is a savings to me. And instead of just having that savings accrue back to the utility and to our natural world around us, it actually goes into like my digital wallet. We call it an aqua share. And basically I'm accumulating saved water credits. So that's sort of a cool concept. So right now we're trying to ascribe a sense of ownership. So we've used a theoretical construct called the median use. Savings are attributed to me. But the one part missing, right, is value. So how do you put a value on that? So what we've done is we've said, okay, let's treat it just like almost a stock that you might buy in the stock exchange, where I have an accrued amount or number of these aqua shares, and I can make them available to people that might want to buy them, people that might want to use more than their historical median. Okay, so now the third case study, which again, just to give you a quick introduction, is what I call the Earth network. So the Earth, to choose but one sort of resource, and you could have chosen air, you could have chosen soil, so you've got microbes. So how do we figure out what this is? And so now we get to take advantage of this incredibly sort of small scale in size and relatively inexpensive sensor technology. Okay, so that said, without this, how could we tell the difference, right? So the top 2 slides are basically comparing 2 rivers. They look about the same. It's pretty hard to tell from just up above observation what the difference is. But when you start to put the sensors down, you can actually see that seasonality, different times of the year, even different times of the day, there's a lot of different things happening. So basically, living database, you can think of it, you might be familiar with this interesting company called 23andMe, which is creating this massive sort of database of human genetic information. At some point, we need to create this massive database, I would argue, of natural information. Climate started. There's others that are working on it. IBM Watson is working on some aspects of this. But again, this opportunity to wire the wild, if you like, and then take advantage of the information being gleaned is really sort of, I believe, a great opportunity going forward. Okay, so this is all super cool, but where is it going to lead? So at the end of the day, we have to remember technology is just a tool, right? We're accumulating data. So the important part is the data, and then how we behave and how we utilize that data. So there'll be always more variants, innovations, and iterations of technology. But let's use the data, as I say here, to sort of imagine what we can do to change our behavior and our use of natural resources to sustain this growing population that the world's going to have to sustain going forward. Conservation technologists will have to work together. So typically you might not see alignment between conservation and entrepreneurs or conservation and technology providers or developers, but having that conversation go hand in hand actually will let us think of more solutions, more ideas about how to use this. I mean, just the other day, right, I talked to an organization that was taking recycled cellular phones that we didn't want. They are actually adapting them and placing them in forests in South America and elsewhere, and they're using it as an acoustic sensor device. Basically, they're listening for people going into cutting trees in illegal logging activity. So, if you're just a conservationist, you might not think of that. And if you're just a cell phone manufacturer, you might not think of that. But having that dialogue between the two, they really can come up with some inspirational ideas. And then finally, right, again, technology is not going to be the answer ever, but technology should be an opportunity, a tool for us to collect this information.